Can I ask what we're waiting for, Jason?
We're good to start. Yeah, everything's working as it should.
Okay. I see Councillor Sutton has his hand up. Does he want?
I can't get into the meeting. I've no idea why. Sorry.
Oh, right. Can you help him with that, Jason?
Councillor Councillor Sutton, we can hear you. Perhaps if you can hear us, then yeah, we'll have to make a start.
Yeah, Councillor Sutton, but basically the only members who can be seen on the screen in this sort of format are those that are on the panel. So although you can speak and participate, we won't see you. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay then, right. Good evening, councillors, officers, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's community forum. Thank you for sparing the time to join us. We hope this will be an interesting and informative meeting. Although the pandemic restrictions have relaxed slightly since we started planning this meeting, the council has made the decision to continue to hold this round of area forums online using Zoom to avoid the remaining risks associated with holding in-person meetings, and to see if this format makes it easier for people to attend. Please bear with us, as although we have practiced this is the first time we have held a meeting like this on Zoom. We would welcome your feedback after the meeting. The meeting will run as an online seminar with just the presenters appearing on screen and everyone else being present as attendees. During this meeting, we will receive presentations on council news, Levelling Up Fund for Town Centre Redevelopment, proposed 2022-23 spending plans and climate change. At the end of each presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions on what you have heard. If you wish to speak, please use the raised hand or chat function to let us know, and I will invite you to speak, and you will then be asked to turn your microphone on. Your image will not be displayed, but all participants will be able to hear you. If you wish to ask questions but do not wish to speak, please use the chat or question functionality. We will then read out the questions on your behalf. Towards the end of, there will be an opportunity and open question session. Please note that this meeting is being filmed live for subsequent broadcast via the council's website. If you are invited to speak, your image will not be displayed, but your name will be. For the first item, I would like to invite the council's Chief Executive, Paul Wilson, to provide a summary of the council's key activities in recent months. Thank you. Paul.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this first forum of the District Council for some years. Clearly, we have had a difficult 2 years, and it's been challenging for all of our communities, but nonetheless, there has been some significant success in terms of council activity, in addition to dealing with the COVID challenges that we face. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes running through some of the key achievements that we've had over the last 2 years, and hopefully you'll find this of interest to you. So here we go. So the first area is in regard to the Green Flag Awards. Now, the District Council has been very successful for many, many years in achieving Green Flag status for Matlock. But actually this year, we've submitted and we've been successful in securing Green Flag status for Bakewell, which is one of our key parks within the north of the district. And we continue to progress the development in our parks, and we're hoping to submit an application for Ashborne Recreation Ground in the very near future, such that we can try and get Green Flag status across all of our key parks in our market towns. Clearly, this year is a very important year as we all celebrate the Queen's Platinum Jubilee, and the District Council is now starting to give publicity to helping communities in terms of how they may wish to celebrate that within their local area. There is information on the Council's website in terms of how you can promote events and the assistance that is going to be available. And in the next few weeks, the District Council is going to be considering a proposal to potentially offer financial assistance to town and parish councils who may wish to support local events within their area, in order to make sure that we can get as many events across the Derbyshire Dales as possible. In terms of support for our communities, our sports development team have recently been awarded £4,000 to deliver an activity and food programme over the Christmas and January holidays. This is effectively aimed at children who are on free school meals. It's been a very successful programme, and we're hoping to continue this into the February half term. As many of you may well be aware, the District Council does offer a very successful Walking for Health programme. And certainly over the last few weeks and months, there's been various activities taking place across the district. A series of fun runs have been organised, and some of these are going to be taking place in Bakewell and Wirksworth across March and April. And further information relating to this is also available on the Council's website. One of the key initiatives of the District Council is to improve our local economy. And we're very proud of the fact that we've recently launched a new Invest in Derbyshire Dales place branding initiative to support our corporate objective for economic growth. One of the key issues relating to this is looking how we can support businesses invest in the Derbyshire Dales, and therefore the new website provides a comprehensive source of information, including our own strategic development sites, which we wish to promote, commercial property searches, and assistance available in terms of grants and loans. So anybody who's interested in opening a business in the Derbyshire Dales, or even if you have an existing business, please take a look at that website, because I'm sure there's some useful information on there which you can hopefully benefit from. Matlock Bath Illuminations is a tremendously successful event that the District Council has hosted for many, many years. Unfortunately, we weren't able to host the event in 2020, but in 2021, we did run the event, albeit with a reduced capacity. This has proved a great success. It's actually exceeded most of our expectations, and the actual planning of the 2022 event is shortly going to get underway. So despite the challenges of COVID, a tremendous boost to the local economy in Matlock Bath and the wider part of the Derbyshire Dales. One of the key initiatives that we've also recently introduced is the offer to pay by phone using a mobile phone app. This is a facility, pay by phone, which is available in many local authorities across the country. District Council introduced this in our car parks in October, already proving a tremendous success, 43,000 transactions, generating over £129,000 worth of income. So the key advantage of this is that actually, if your ticket is due to expire, you don't need to go back to the machine and purchase a new ticket. You can actually do all of that on your mobile phone through the app, therefore hoping and assisting people spend longer within the Derbyshire Dales without having to worry that their ticket is due to expire. We're going to be considering climate change initiatives later on in the agenda this evening, but biodiversity is tremendously important to the District Council. We've actually set up an internal member working group working with local interest groups across the district, and we've been piloting a number of sites across the area, including 2 areas in Hathersage, 2 in Bradwell, 2 in Hartington, 3 in Matlock, 2 in Wirksworth, and additional sites in Wardlow, Beeley, Cromford and Doveridge. Now, part of this project is about how we can encourage biodiversity by natural wildflower growth within areas such as grass verges and open spaces. The initial pilot has been tremendously successful. We've had some really good feedback, and we're hoping to develop and encourage even more of those sites in the coming 12 months. One of the key projects in the south of the district is the building of a new Ashborne Pavilion. The previous pavilion that existed on the Ashborne Recreation Ground was in a pretty dilapidated state, and rather than invest monies in trying to bring up to standard a pretty poor facility, working with local groups and by receiving financial assistance from various partnerships across the country, the District Council has also put its own money into this project, and we're very proud of the fact that the Ashborne Pavilion Group, Sports and Community Partnership, will shortly be opening this key facility in Ashborne, which will be a tremendous asset to the town and actually the wider Derbyshire Dales. Another key project of the District Councils, which has been operating for a number of years, is the Hearst Farm Regeneration project, which just continues to go from strength to strength. This is about giving power to the local community, supporting that local community in terms of developing their own aspirations. We've actually been very successful in drawing in grant funding. Some of that has come from Sport England, but we've also had financial assistance from the government in terms of moving forward with an awful lot of projects there, which is actually giving a real boost to that part of Matlock. So, tremendous success story. In terms of our estates projects, there are a number of projects which we've been progressing in recent months, and there are further projects coming forward in the very near future. One of those is to replace the shelter in Matlock Bath that was damaged by a tree fall. We've also been undertaking work in Hawleys Parks. We've got further projects in this financial year to improve the clock tower in Hawleys Park, and we're also going to be completing the replacement of the Ashborne Bandstand and also a new vehicle bridge at Ashborne Recreation Ground. Again, one of the key projects that we've been able to assist with is an initiative from the Ashborne branch of the Royal British Legion to undertake a complete refurbishment of the Ashborne Memorial Gates. And anybody who's seen those gates now with the uplighters that have been installed cannot fail but be impressed by the standard of work that's been undertaken, but also the impressive way in which we can commemorate people who actually served the Derbyshire Dales and the country in the 2 World Wars. Again, with a very much climate change theme, we've been very successful in our Green Homes Grant programme. Phase 2 of that included 33 homes which are underway. Planning consent has been achieved for external wall insulation works at Mornington Rise in Matlock. There are further schemes in the south of the district. And we've also recently secured just over £900,000 of government funding to help with the energy efficiency rating of local homes. So again, climate change is really important. Addressing the inefficiency of existing housing stock is a key component of that. And we're very pleased to be able to put our resources towards bringing those projects to fruition. You may be aware that literally this week, planning permission has been granted for the Bakewell Road cinema proposal. This is something the District Council has been working on for the best part of 2 years now. A really exciting project to actually boost this part of the Bakewell Road in Matlock, develop the nighttime economy, create jobs, create new opportunities. And we are going to be working towards bringing a proposal back before members in the very near future to actually take that project to the next stage. So a great project. It's really gathering pace now, and we're certainly looking to deliver that in the next 12 to 18 months. Affordable housing has been a key priority of the District Council for many, many years. We've recently approved 37 new affordable homes on the former Dove Garage site in Ashborne. In the central part of the district, there is a 53-unit scheme currently taking place on Bakewell Road. And again, this is really important, not just to the local economy, but by making sure that we are delivering affordable housing to local people such that they can stay in the area and not be forced to move away. I'll say we're going to be considering climate change later on the agenda, so I won't be saying too much about this, but two particular initiatives that we are going to be progressing this summer is we're going to be holding a green event to be held in Matlock Hawleys Park in July. This is to effectively celebrate different opportunities that exist for communities to take advantage of climate change initiatives. There's going to be a fantastic homes exhibition led through the Local Authority Energy Partnership. And in terms of judging our performance on climate change, there's recently been a scorecard which has been developed, which looks at the climate change plans of all local authorities up and down the country who've published one. And Derbyshire Dales is actually acknowledged as being one of the top performers. So please take a look at that and see how we compare to other local authorities. In terms of more general service issues, we continue to service the Derbyshire Dales on a whole range of issues in terms of littering being empty and making sure that that's done on schedule, keeping our streets clean and tidy. Our CRM project, which is a customer relationship management system, effectively this is about enabling as many residents to access as many services as possible online 24/7. So again, that's been a tremendous success, dealt with over 130,000 service requests and 91% of those being completed through the self-service modules. We continue to offer homelessness and housing advice, and part of that also extends to receiving the first Afghan refugees in Ashborne and Derbyshire as part of the Afghan resettlement programme. Staying on the theme of council housing, the District Council has recently agreed that we will start to develop our own housing programme. We've now purchased 2 empty homes and a third one is being occupied, which has been bequeathed to the council. We're going to be looking at opportunities in Moniash and Ashborne in the coming weeks and months. On the economic development front, post-COVID, we successfully delivered a Welcome Back Fund, which included a whole series of projects advanced by town and parish councils. Our Local Projects Fund, which gives members a budget to spend on community projects within their area. Again, has been tremendously successful in the last 12 months, over 84 projects have been supported. And on the economic development front, the Ashbourne Airfield Link Road has finally been scheduled for completion after many, many years of hard work, not just by the District Council, but also the landowner and Derbyshire County Council. A real success story that which will again deliver significant economic benefits to the Derbyshire Dales. And that concludes my part, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions on any of that content.
If anyone has any questions, would you like to put your hands up sign on, please? No? Ah, yes. Is it Bill Hanley? Can't see your full name.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
what's your question?
I live in Hathersage, and apart from a couple of verges, which are quite small, there's a lot about Matlock and Ashbourne, which to us in Hathersage is a very long way away. We feel settlements on the edges have very little input from the District Council other than emptying the bins. So that's just an observation as to what you do for us up in the north of the district, really, in terms of contributions to our community and our life here.
Okay, perhaps I can pick that point up, Chair. Clearly, the slides that I've focused on really are just a snapshot of activity across the district, and we've picked on particular projects which residents may well be unaware that the District Council is actually delivering. But in terms of services, clearly we do look to deliver comprehensive services across the whole of the Derbyshire Dales. Our Clean and Green service, for example, is active across the whole of the district. If there are any particular projects in Hathersage or anywhere else that you are interested in developing, then by all means contact us and let us know, and if we can help in any way, then we'll certainly try and do that.
Right, thank you for your question, Mr. Hanley. Do we have any more questions for Paul? No? Okay, thank you for your presentation, Paul. Right, the next item will receive a presentation from Steve Capes, the Council Director of Regeneration and Policy, on the Levelling Up Fund for Town Centre redevelopment. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm now on. So yeah, just a few slides from me then about the Levelling Up Fund, which is one of the gifts from the government. There's quite a few that they're sort of handing around at the moment. This is one that actually will hopefully be of significant benefit to the Derbyshire Dales. So as I shall say as we move on to the next slide, it's for capital infrastructure, and the government means it's things what people can see essentially. So for building works and so on that has a visible impact. Now they've told us that Derbyshire Dales is one of the priority areas for this fund. They've told us that for other funds as well, and we haven't actually had any funding, but we are nevertheless hopeful. The timetable, as far as we know, is that they're going to announce round 2 of the Levelling Up Fund, which is the one we're bidding for, sometime this spring. And then bids will be submitted, we think, late spring, early summer. So we have only really a few months to go. Now, we know from the round 1 of the Levelling Up Fund that actually most of the winning schemes that run the government's competition were actually for single towns, one town at a time. But it is possible to put in packages of 2 or more towns. The focus is on local infrastructure that's visible to people, that makes things look better and work better for towns. And regeneration in town centres is one of the key themes of the fund. But there are some things that are key in order for it to work. One is that match funding is available, although there's up to £20 million potentially available. You have to provide 10% at least yourself. So if you've got a 20 million project, you've got to find £2 million at least yourself. So it's not just a gift from the government. And also in order to win, they want to make sure that you've got contracts ready and all permissions, such as planning permissions, secured as well. So what the District Council has said we'll do, we'll bid for a strategy for our market towns in order to regenerate them. And to do that, we actually wrote to all of our 4 market towns and asking them to submit a scheme. As you know, the Derbyshire Dales, as well as the rural areas, has got 4 towns. This fund is focused on the towns as far as we know. So we've written to all of them to ask for schemes to come forward. The difficulty, as you know from that, as I've mentioned, is that successful bids in round 1 were on the whole for a single town, but for the Derbyshire Dales, that presents us with an issue. Other things we've learned from round 1 Levelling Up Fund, which took place last year, is that if there is any weak element of a bid, that pulls down the whole thing. So they don't just knock out the bits that don't work; they knock out the whole thing. We also know that shopping lists, just including everything that your towns want to do in a bid, scores poorly as well. So we have a few difficulties in this regard in the Derbyshire Dales. We have a lack of council-controlled land, and despite what many people think, the District Council isn't actually a big landowner. There's very, very small amounts of land that we actually control, and there's few projects which the government would term shovel-ready. But we are working on it, and we're working in particular with 2 towns. As I say, we wrote to all 4 market towns in the Derbyshire Dales, but 2 of them came back with projects to work on, and those are Matlock, the Bakewell Road Western Gateway, as it's grandly termed. There is a project there based around, as Paul mentioned earlier, the project to convert the market hall into a cinema. But there may be other things that can be added to that as well. Now that has some strengths in terms of levelling up. It's council-owned land, one of the few bits that we've got. It's a corporate priority for the council. Planning permission as of this week is now in place. It's not just imminent, it's in place. And there's some funding there as well, and a lot of the work that goes on around it as well. So there's a lot to commend it. Ashborne has also put down various proposals. They're less advanced, but there's a lot to commend them too. More work to do to get them up to bid ready status. But the timescale, as I've mentioned, is short. We've got this spring only, so it's those short timescales is a constraining factor for us. 3 to 6 months we think we're working on. But what we are saying is that as a district council, there's proposals in Matlock and Ashbourne. Even if only one of them can go forward to the Levelling Up Fund, we will work with both at Matlock and Ashbourne to develop their projects. And we're going to get technical assessment and technical assistance to help them. We know we might not succeed with a bid to the Levelling Up Fund, but that is just one step in what we're doing for regeneration. The schemes that don't go forward, we'll continue to work with them so they're ready for whatever the next government funding bid is. And even if they go forward and don't win this time, again, we'll continue to work with them to whatever the next government funding bid is. So we're as a council are committed to working with both those towns, but not just that. We've also, as I mentioned, written to the other towns as well. We've written to Bakewell as well. And although they've got nothing to put forward at the moment, perhaps they will in future. So we'll continue to work with Bakewell and indeed Wirksworth as well. So I think that's all from me in terms of a presentation, Chair. But again, if there's any questions, I can happily deal with them.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Steve? I can't see any. Okay, thank you for your presentation, Steve. The next item is a presentation on the proposed 2022-23 spending plans from Karen Hendrickson, who is the Council's Director of Resources. Karen.
Good evening. So I'm the Director of Resources at Derbyshire Dales District Council, and I'm here this evening to give you a short presentation on the Council's proposals for its budget and council tax for the coming financial year 22-23. So the purpose of this presentation is to give you information, but mainly to seek your views on our spending proposals and council tax. The good news to start with, we're not proposing any cuts in services for 22-23. So all the services that you've received in this year, you'll continue to get. In this slide, I thought you'd like to see how we spend the money that we receive. So this one shows revenue expenditure, which is expenditure on day-to-day spending. So services like refuse collection, clean and green, and so on. I don't know if you can see the detail of the pie chart, but our largest area of spend is on waste and recycling. We spend 32% of our funding on that. These figures do include a reallocation of management and overheads, and they are gross spending, so they ignore any income received for these services. This slide shows the income that we receive to fund our revenue services. In recent years, the government reduced grant funding, though it hasn't for 22-23. But this meant that we had to become less reliant on government grants and more self-sufficient. You can see that the largest area of our funding comes from our own sales fees and charges. Council tax accounts for 38% of our income. In terms of capital spending, this pie chart shows the main areas that capital spending is on the purchase or improvements of assets. So it's spending on things like land, buildings, or vehicles. Our current capital programme covers 5 years and totals £12.3 million. Most of our capital programme is spent on housing, £4.7 million or 38%. Also on vehicles used for service delivery, which take up 18% or £2.2 million. We plan to spend £737,000, 6%, to meet our ambition to achieve net zero carbon emissions from council operations by 2030, and plan to spend 10%, £1.3 million, on regeneration projects that we hope will bring jobs and prosperity to our market towns. To fund this level of spending, we've had to increase some fees and charges for 22-23. Increases have generally been in the range of 3.1% to 4.5%. Some fees and charges have been frozen. These include car park pay and display charges, store market rents, and taxi licences. The current rate of inflation using CPI is 5.4%, and that's predicted to go even higher, possibly up to 7%. With the exception of charges for bulky waste collections, our fee increases are significantly lower than current and predicted inflation rates. We're proposing a council tax increase of 1.94% for 22-23. Again, this is significantly less than the current rate of inflation. The council's therefore absorbing most of the inflationary increase in our service costs, but we can't absorb it all without having to reduce service spend elsewhere. This slide shows the impact of the 1.94% increase, which would work out at around £4.25 a year for a Band D property, which is around 8p a week. The council does have the power to increase council tax by up to £5 for a Band D property, so we haven't recommended that that maximum be applied. The table shows that if you live in a Band A property, the proposed increase of 1.94% would give an increase of £2.83 for 22-23, or around 5p a week. If you live in a Band H property, the increase would amount to around 16p a week. The 1.94% council tax increase will raise around £130,000. And our draft budget for 22-23 includes £150,000 extra spending on economic development. We hope this will help increase jobs and prosperity across the district. For years after 22-23, the financial situation is very uncertain and financial planning is very difficult. The government have said that they're carrying out reviews of our grant funding levels and the amount of business rates that we're allowed to retain. These reviews should have been completed 2 years ago, but haven't yet done so. That brings a lot of uncertainty. There are other cost pressures, such as addressing climate change and funding future capital projects. Our sources of funding for capital projects are being diminished. Some types of income are very volatile and difficult to forecast. One example of this is the income from recycling. Volumes of recycling can change, but the bigger risk is from changes in market prices, which can fluctuate very significantly. We have set up a reserve with some money set aside to mitigate the financial risks from recycling. Another area of volatile income is business rates, and again, we have a reserve to mitigate those risks. The final uncertainty is inflation. As I said, inflation is increasing significantly, and it's very difficult to predict when it will come down again. This slide shows our draft medium-term financial plan. By law, the council has to set a balanced budget before the start of each financial year. The bottom line of the medium-term financial plan shows that while we have balanced our budget for the year 22-23, the coming financial year. The risk of reduced government grant funding from 23-24 means we have a corporate savings target of around £400,000 a year from 23-24. We do have a reserve, another one, that could be used to offset this in the short term to buy us time to develop a saving plan when we know if the government will definitely intend to reduce our grant funding. So I'd like to have a crystal ball to be able to see if we're getting any grant funding. The government had promised us that they'd give us grant awards, not just for 22-23, but for the 3 years after that. But they did, in fact, only issue a 1-year grant settlement. Hopefully, when the governments have completed their reviews and informed us of the new funding levels, the position should be much clearer. This presentation is going to be presented on the council's website for you to look at if you need to. The councillors are due to meet on the 3rd of March to consider the proposed increase. If you've got any comments that you'd like to feed back to us, you can email us at finance@derbyshiredales.gov.uk by 28th of February, and we'll take that into account and during the council meeting. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Karen? Mr. Hanley again.
Yeah, thank you. I'd apologise for another question, but perhaps I'm the only one listening. I don't know. Just two things. Firstly, because I did try and look and I couldn't find them. Will those? I think the spend, the proportion of spend and the income and the expenditure are quite useful. Will they go out with council tax bills? That's the. And I think Derbyshire County Council do, and I'm sure they do. But just a confirmation about that.
Yes, we usually put the pie charts into the Dales Matters leaflet that goes out with the council tax bills. All
right, great. And I'm interested because I did ask a question before the meeting, but a third of the expenditure goes on waste and recycling from your figures, and that is the major service that certainly we in Hathersage and surrounding area get from the district council. It's very apparent. Would you agree that has you failed to deliver that satisfactorily? I know there's many reasons, but that is a real problem. There are still problems with collections, green bins that's a bit haphazard, bins left out for weeks on end and things. So I think that's a real problem that the district council have had, especially given it's the major part of what the district council does, and they failed over the last year or two.
Mr. Hanley, it's Councillor Garry Purdy speaking, leader. If you bear with me, please, I'll come to that in a short time and I'll cover it for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hanley. Do we have any more questions for Karen? No? Okay, thank you, Karen, for your presentation. For the final presentation of the evening, I would like to invite Joe Hill, the Council's Climate Change Project Officer, to tell us more about climate change and the progress made by the Council in its ambitions to be a net zero organisation by 2030. Joe.
Thank you. So good evening, everyone. I'm Jo Hill. I'm the Climate Change Projects Officer for the District Council, and I'm going to provide a short update on Council progress to net zero and a brief overview of some district-wide climate change initiatives. So firstly, just to set some context, the Council made a climate change emergency declaration back in 2019 and followed that up with a climate change strategy and action plan in September 2020 with an ambition to be a net zero organisation by 2030. The pathway you can see defined on this slide Just to report on our emissions, really, the baseline emissions that we had back in 2019-20 were 807 tonnes of carbon dioxide and equivalent, and we were pleased to see a reduction in 2020-2021, quite a significant reduction, but obviously, as with everything in the current climate, that there was a pandemic impact there. So we're interested to see what our emissions look like next year, but we have to expect to see a slight increase on where we were in 2020-2021. So just to touch on some of the projects in detail that might make up our pathway, you won't be surprised to know that some of our major sources of emissions are our buildings, and in particular our 3 key sites, our town hall, the agricultural business centre in Bakewell and the depot. All those 3 sites are going to be funded by a successful bid to the public sector decarbonisation scheme. We've been successful in attracting almost £600,000 worth of funding, which will enable us to make some really significant energy efficiency improvements and install some low carbon heating in those buildings. When all that work completes, which should happen by March 23, we should expect to see a 31% emissions reductions from our built estate. Our vehicles, our owned and operated transport, accounted for 44% of emissions in our baseline year 2019-20, which is clearly significant. We've undertaken a fleet analysis with the support of Nottingham City Council, and we're currently working through what operational changes we need in order to be able to transition to electric vehicles. There will be an increase in upfront purchasing costs, and we also need to plan very carefully the installation of the charging infrastructure required for electric vehicles and the maintenance infrastructure as well. We will see an increase in electricity demand, but we're trying to mitigate that, as you'll see on the left, with installation of solar panels at our Northwood depot in Darley-Dale. One of our longer term projects is to think about insetting our residual emissions. So as we seek to remove gas central heating from our buildings, we will see an increased use in electricity, and we'll increase our use of electricity through charging our vehicles. What we want to ideally be able to do is provide a local secure supply. We've identified 5 sites as potential sort of mini solar farms, I suppose, and we're going through technical and financial feasibility studies for those sites at the minute. Clearly, significant investment will be required here, but obviously there's the opportunity also, to provide some revenue, some income for the council through those sites. Our leisure centres have been outsourced and managed on our behalf by Freedom Leisure since 2018, and the council's invested significantly in reducing emissions from the leisure centres since that time. More recently, we were successful in a bid again to the public sector decarbonisation scheme for £734,000 to install solar PV at Ashborne Leisure Centre, as you can see on the left, and to decarbonise the heating there. As you can imagine, the leisure centre has a high heat demand, so being able to take out some of the gas heating there and replace that with very large air source heat pumps will enable an emissions reduction of 56% year on year on completion. And some of the sort of softer, more cultural changes that are going on within the organisation. The pandemic has had its benefits, and one of those is that we've considered agile working and how we might sort of adapt to that. And so, there's been some investment in some infrastructure and equipment to allow staff to be more flexible in how they work and hopefully therefore reduce the amount of time they're spending travelling around. As of today, pleased to say that all of our senior staff and directors have become carbon literate through official accredited training. We also now have climate change impact assessments on all reports that require members to make decisions. So that really focuses attention on the potential impacts of any decisions that members are making. In terms of our procurement, obviously, we have a carbon footprint in respect of the things that we purchase, on behalf of the public, our goods, our services, etc. And we're currently developing a sustainable purchasing policy so that we can make sure that we reduce those emissions where possible. And in terms of our land, we're not a huge landowner, but that land that we do own that isn't required for other things, we're working at the minute with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust to try to think about how we can use some of that land, particularly alongside the Derwent, for natural flood management schemes. And Paul highlighted the good work earlier that's been going on in terms of our biodiversity projects. In terms of district-wide initiatives, the pie chart there shows our main sources of emissions in the district, and the figure there kind of gives you some scale and some context of the district-wide emissions versus council owned and operated sort of emissions. Where we're focusing our attention is where we feel we can have the most influence and impact. And for us, that's around housing at the minute as the housing authority. As you can see, housing accounts for 16.3% of emissions, so it's a significant amount that we can start to facilitate tackling. And again, Paul mentioned this earlier, but just to reiterate the good work that's been going on through the local authority delivery scheme in terms of improving the energy efficiency of homes, external wall insulation, loft top-ups and solar PV, etc. So we've had a lot of success in those schemes. They are climate change initiatives in the sense that they reduce emissions, but really importantly in the current climate, they also seek to tackle fuel poverty as well. Paul also mentioned successful bid for new funding, and that's something that I'm working through at the minute to see which areas will be able to benefit from that. We continue to work with our housing associations such as Platform on bids that they can make as well to similar schemes, and they've just been successful as well in obtaining some funding, and we'll be starting some work in Ashborne and Brailsford fairly shortly. And finally on that slide we have an ongoing project that's looking to tackle energy efficiency or poor energy efficiency in housing in the private rented sector. That's a project that our environmental health team are leading on. Just some pictures there, because it's always nice to break up some slides with some images. The properties on the left at the bottom there are properties in Hogneston, and that's actually a live photo from just a couple of days ago. That's the latest round of external wall insulation work that we're doing in the district. Although we're not the transport authority, we are trying to do our bit to support the uptake of electric vehicles and a shift to cleaner methods of transport in the district. We obviously have our charging points already installed in the market towns. We're doing further feasibility to see where further charging infrastructure might be suited, and that's in partnership by and large with Derbyshire County Council, trying to make sure that obviously we're working across the districts and boroughs so we get a really good geographical spread of charging infrastructure. And finally, just to touch on community engagement, we are working within our communities in a number of different ways. We get out the messages about climate change through Dales Matters, our social media, events that Paul touched on, such as taking the Fantastic Home vehicle that's pictured there out into the community so we can start those conversations with our residents, frequently talking to our town and parish councils and supporting applications to the Rural Community Energy Fund, and also the work that we're doing through the home energy efficiency schemes and referring our local businesses to decarbonise funding scheme support. So that was a whiz through, and I'm very happy to take any questions on any of the detail.
Thank you, Jo. Do we have any questions for Jo? Councillor Sutton.
Yes, thank you. I noticed we talked about the ABC in Bakewell. Just wondered that obviously this was going to be a core part of what's happening. What are we doing about the natural gas caused by the animals in the market?
That's not something that's formed part of the net zero strategy and action plan, in the sense that that's not something that we can directly control. We're focusing, or the strategy and action plan at the moment focuses on reducing our own emissions.
Do we not think that ought to be part of it?
I mean, somebody else may wish to answer the question, but from my perspective, obviously, I understand the implications of methane from livestock. I suppose there's lots to be considered there in terms of the economic benefit of having the market in the agricultural business centre and the other benefits that brings to the community. I think councils are very much led in the direction at the minute of making reductions, where we feel we can have a meaningful influence, and certainly that's something at the moment that that I'm not aware that we can, but perhaps Paul, you wish to take that on.
Yeah, I'm happy to respond to that, Joe. Well, clearly, once the district council is the owner of the livestock market, we don't actually control the operations at the livestock market. So that's very much an issue for Bagshaws, who operate that market under a long lease that they have with the district council. But Councillor Sutton raises an important point, because methane clearly is a contributory factor towards climate change. And I think it's an issue which, as a nation, and particularly the farming community, are going to have to work through and see what measures they can take in order to reduce the amount of methane which does find its way into the environment. So from the council's point of view, we just manage the facility on behalf of Bagshaws. The operations are very much for them, and I don't think it's necessarily our role to actively get engaged in how individual farmers, individual farming community should actually manage their own businesses. I think that's part of a much broader and wider discussion that's clearly needed across the UK, not just in the Dales.
Thank you, Paul. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions for Joe? No? Right. Thank you for your presentation, Joe. That's the last presentation for the evening, but before moving on to the question and answer session, I'd like to invite the council's leader, Councillor Garry Purdy, to say a few words. Gary.
Well, thank you, Chair. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Just very quickly, Councillor Sutton, on that last note, this has been dealt with by DEFRA, but I'm quite prepared to work with the local ward councillors and meet with the head of the ABC at Bakewell to discuss further. As the Chief Exec said earlier on in the forum, an awful lot of good work has been done, and it is a snapshot in time. When myself became leader and Councillor Sue Hobson, who was on the panel, became leaders in May 2019, we never expected what was around the corner. At the end of 2019, before the three tsunamis I'm going to talk about came, we had an external peer challenge review, which is other execs and council leaders from the rest of the country examined our authority. I'm pleased to say that we came out with an excellent report, an excellent council, and with strong leadership. But very soon around the corner, we were met with what I'm calling the three tsunamis, the Matlock floods, which tested our officers, and I know some officers worked 36 hours at a stretch. And then, of course, the pandemic, which has created havoc and upset and misery for a lot of people, and stretched everyone beyond imagination. And then the last straw was the 100,000 HGV drivers short in the country. And of course, that brings me to the point where, on behalf of the District Council, I really want to apologise for the significant disruption that many residents across the Derbyshire Dales have experienced to their waste collection service in recent months. Whilst this situation is unacceptable to all concerned, it is important to have a clear and accurate understanding of the context and, most importantly, the actions taken by the District Council to address the problems that we have encountered. As residents will be aware, as I've just said, national, regional and local media coverage, there was an acute shortage of HGV drivers, estimated by the Haulage Association at some 100,000, due to, they said, Brexit and the fact that the HGV driver training centres were closed as a result of the pandemic. And then, of course, once the pandemic hit, it hit the staff in the cabs, and there was a lot of illness through that. So it's really impacted, and it's a sore point when we're blamed for all of this. And I have to push back and say, we do apologise, but please recognise these tremendous impacts that have come this past 2 years. So we're not on our own with that. You will have read that Sainsbury's and other supermarkets were suffering And you know that the petrol shortage occurred as well. And it's a fact that Serco was not immune to these impacts. Notwithstanding that, the service that our residents have received has been simply unacceptable. And residents are quite right to express their dissatisfaction on Serco's performance, which is shared by elected members and officers. In response to residents' concerns, last October, the council agreed to commission an independent inquiry into Serco's delivery of the 2020 waste contract. This review has now been concluded, and the report is due to be considered at a meeting of full council on Thursday, 17th of February. A copy of that report is available now on the council's website. In summary, the report concludes that there has been an incomplete delivery of the contract requirements by Serco, and there is a need for significant improvements to take place. Despite the council taking all proportionate and necessary steps to manage the challenge, performance has been acceptable. And on behalf of the council, I sincerely apologise for this. Quite rightly, residents want to know when they can expect service delivery to be fully resumed. And in this regard, I give assurance that our officers are working extremely hard with Serco representatives to put the necessary arrangements in place as quickly as possible to address the ongoing issues. But please be aware, there are some issues that are outside the direct control of this authority and Serco. On a very quick note, Mr. Hanley, I appreciate your questions, but no, Athens is not forgotten. We're actually recently been in talks on a bus service, and I had the pleasure of visiting my first year that wonderful Athens Business Centre. So any schemes, as the Chief Exec says, you want to raise, then that applies to all villages and all of our areas in Derbyshire Dales. Do please contact us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Purdy. At this stage, I'd like to ask Ros to read out the questions on waste received in advance of the meeting. Ros.
Thank you, Chair. I think the questions that have been put on waste are actually intended for two of our subsequent forums, but I don't know if you want those to be addressed this evening as well.
Ash, do you want to deal with those this evening? No. Well, I think if we move on, Ros.
We do have a question from Mr. Hanley that he's submitted, and that's another one to do with spending. I don't know if Karen wants to address that. She has done quite a comprehensive response, which I can forward on to Mr. Hanley tomorrow in full, so he's got that for his records. But the question is, what is the proportion of DDDC income spent on refuse collection to the point they had over to DCC and parks and gardens and other main spending heads, which I think Karen's probably addressed in her presentation, but I don't know if Karen just wants to come in on that. Or indeed if Mr. Hanley has any more comment.
Mr. Hanley.
No, thank you. No, I think that's been answered. And if I'm going to get a response as well, thank you to everyone that's answered the questions. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So is that it then, Ros?
Yes, that's it for the questions for this evening.
Okay.
But I don't know if anyone present perhaps got anything they wish to ask.
Yeah, but before we move on, are there any other questions relating to the waste collection? No? Okay then. Now's your opportunity to ask questions, but first I'll ask Ros to read out any questions raised in advance of the meeting. Were there any sent in, Ros? General questions?
again, Chair, we've had one or two for the subsequent forums.
Okay.
There is one for this evening, but I don't think the lady is present. And that is to do with concerns around road traffic and speed at Hackney. And although this is obviously not a district council function, it's a county council function, our community safety officer has done a little bit of research for it, and we've got a response to send to her. So if she doesn't participate in a future forum, we'll ensure that she gets that response.
Okay, thank you. So are there any further questions for any of the officers? No? Okay then, so all that's left for me to do now is to say thank you to the councillors.
Yeah, there's a question up from Councillor
Hobson. Oh, sorry, Councillor Hobson, didn't see your hand up.
Sorry, Councillor Froggatt. It isn't a question. I know we're coming to the end now. This is the start of our community forums. Thank everybody who has attended tonight, and hopefully there will be more at the next two. So we've opened that dialogue, and I think that's a good start. Thank you, Councillor Froggatt.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So it's just left to say thank you to councillors, officers and ladies and gentlemen that attended. And if you have any comments about the format or content of this meeting, please let us know using the contact information in the post-event email that you will get to your email address that you registered your interest on. So we hope to see you again at future forum meetings. Thank you for attending. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.